Our last segment of the evening, this will be a quick one. Our NFL head coaching carousel. There are now 8 teams that need a new head coach
Cool.
due to the Sean Payton news today. Yes, James, that is very cool. Um, you know what? Let's
What's up?
start. What's up?
I don't know. What's up?
I don't know. Uh, let's start with our New York Giants. Why don't we? They are on the market for a new head coach. They have a new GM in Joe Shane, and it's looking more and more likely that Brian Daboll will be announced the Giants head coach on Friday morning. So that is my prediction for the New York Football Giants. I know they've interviewed Leslie Frazier and Lou Anarumo, and they're going to be, and they also interviewed Dan Quinn. They will be interviewing Bryan Flores on Thursday, and I believe if unless anything crazy happens in that Flores interview that makes them change their minds, they're going Brian Daboll on Friday.
I think I'm going to go with Daboll as well. Had concluded his second interview today, I believe. So really just ahead of everybody. I mean, usually you see the first round of interviews get completed before a guy gets a second interview. He's gotten 2 interviews in the last 3 days by the Giants already. Had his first one on Friday when Joe Shane was announced the GM for about 5 minutes. It seemed like Brian Daboll got the interview a couple hours later. But I think it's Brian Daboll 100%, like Tom alluded to, unless Brian Flores, who I would also love if he does become the Giants head coach. I just don't see anything happening that Brian Daboll will not become the next head coach of the New York Giants.
Johnny, who do you got?
Who do I want, or who do I got, or both? Who do I
Both.
want? I
We'll
want
take
Brian
both.
Flores, but I think it's gonna be Daboll, and I'd be fine with Daboll too. I've wanted Flores just because of the name recognition, but the more and more I hear about Daboll, the more I'm fine with him too. Look, by accident, and I'll put this out there, by accident, he'll be better than what we've had. So
that is true.
Let's hope so.
I don't think it can get worse, but I mean, I want to put it out
James,
there.
Daboll, clean sweep for Daboll.
Yep.
Yeah, I want Daboll too. I think Flores, a lot of people want Flores, but he's very similar to Joe Judge. I mean, if you didn't like Joe Judge, I feel like you're gonna get a lot of the same stuff with Brian Flores. But he did revolve a Miami Dolphins team. I think Lou Anarumo is a dark horse. I think that is a dark horse pick. If somehow the Bengals get to the Super Bowl, that's a name to watch out for. Even though it's doubtful that he'd be able to take the job. I think the Giants are pretty much set on Daboll at this point. But if the Bengals lose, there is a chance that Lou could get a second interview early next week if the Giants want to continue to wait this out. Because I know John Mara said that the team would be very patient. But as Kyle mentioned, 2 interviews in 3 days. It's got to be Daboll, guys.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next up, Gabe Flayton's Minnesota Vikings. They did not get Ryan Poles in their GM search. They've still yet to name one, but I'll go first here. I think they're going outside the NFL. I know a couple weeks back I was saying, well, maybe they go with Doug Peterson. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're getting Matt Campbell from Iowa State. Geographically close. I know they've been linked to him. They've interviewed him. I like him a lot. I think he's a good fit for their scheme and what they're trying to build. I think the Vikings are going to go young and hire Matt Campbell as their next coach. Now, I know he has a 4-4 record in bowls in college, but his record is very impressive. 77-49. He's only 42 years of age. You're talking about wanting to go younger. I think he's definitely an option. I mean, I also thought about Kevin O'Connell as well, but I think Matt Campbell, he wasn't the reason why Iowa State had a bad year this year. I mean, Brock Purdy just was not living up to expectations. So I'm going to go Matt Campbell for Minnesota.
For me, Tom, in this situation, I know you just completely argued against it. I'm going to go with Doug Peterson. I'm going to go with Doug Peterson. I think that it's going to be him because it's seemingly that the people in which they've interviewed, at least for the GM candidacies, seem to be flying off the board. And with that being said, I think their head coaching decision is going to be delayed. So in my personal opinion, that means the head coach is going to be delayed as well, which means that it's going to be a guy that's no longer in the NFL at this point in time. It's going to be a guy that probably gets interviewed within the next couple weeks or something like that. I think he's only interviewed with Jacksonville, even if if that is even the case, I know he's been rumored to them, but I think that that's where he ends up in Minnesota, Doug Peterson.
All right, who's next?
I'll take it. I like Tom's idea. I like going outside of the box for Minnesota. So I haven't heard of your guy from Iowa State, Campbell, but he sounds good to me.
Interesting. Okay, so Johnny agrees with me. Matt Campbell to Minnesota. James, what do you got?
I'm agreeing with the gentleman above me.
Ooh.
2-2. All right.
We are
Let you
split
go.
down the middle for the Minnesota Vikings, and I think it's interesting because the Vikings should have made the playoffs this year, right? There's too much talent on that roster for them not to, right? You have a top 5 receiver, a top 5 running back, and those in hand make Kirk Cousins look like a top 10 quarterback, right? Who can still play at a high level in this league. And, you have Adam Thielen as well, who was dealing with an injury, and that hurt them, right?
Yeah.
So I think Minnesota should be back in the playoffs next year if they get this GM and head coaching hire right. Denver Broncos are up next. I guess I'll start this off again since that's the order we've been going in. I think Dan Quinn is their guy. That's who they've been linked to. Dan Quinn, former head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. Obviously, the last Broncos head coach, Vic Fangio, is a defensive-minded guy. The Broncos right now don't have really a quarterback of the future, in my opinion. I think they're going with Dan Quinn as their head coach. He has experience. Him and John Elway have a good relationship. I think that's where they're going with this hire.
That's where I was going with too, Tom. So that's 3 for 3, you and I.
Oh boy.
Yeah, that's what I had written down. I thought Dan Quinn, like you said, I think that was a fit.
I completely make that 3 then, because I completely agree with you guys. I think that's ultimately the destiny of this Broncos team. And Tommy kind of hit on all the points there. Defensive-minded franchise, going with a defensive-minded coach again. We saw the turnaround of Dallas' defense from historically one of the worst in football to one of the best, and now he's already inheriting a top 5, top 10 potential defense from what we saw this year, and just fixing the quarterback situation should make them a very good competitive team in the AFC. I think they're going to go with Dan Quinn.
Bring the brooms out, clean sweep.
Clean sweep.
Okay. All right. Clean sweep on 2 of our 3 teams so far. Next up, the Miami Dolphins. Obviously, they fired Bryan Flores for reasons that had to deal with ownership. Their GM and him did not get along. Flores was very blunt about saying that Tua was not his guy, this and that. I think the Dolphins are going to go young and hire Mike McDaniel, the offensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers. I think he's done an outstanding job with Deebo Samuel, and I think he's one of the brightest young offensive minds in football. I really like him a lot. I mean, guys, Elijah Mitchell was a 6th-round draft pick, and he's starting, and he's one of the leading rushers in the NFL this year. You're doing something right if you're taking Jimmy Garoppolo to an NFC championship game. They won 10 games without George Kittle and Jimmy G for half the season. So I think the Dolphins should go with Mike McDaniel here, as his name's been heating up a lot as of late.
Tom, I agree with you, but just to be different. I think it will be McDaniel, but just to be different.
Okay.
A name that's been surrounded with that team has been Jim Caldwell. And last coaching with the Detroit Lions, I think that we could all agree is that he was the coach, at least as far as I'm concerned, the last decade. He's been the one responsible for the only success that the Detroit Lions have had over the course of the last decade in terms of winning seasons. In fact, he got fired after a winning season, which he never should have, especially after the replacements of Patricia. And I mean, Dan Campbell in his first year, he showed competitiveness, but in terms of wins, not so much upon improvement. But Jim Caldwell, I don't think ever should have been out of football and will get another opportunity to head coach a football team. And I think the Miami Dolphins are going to be a team that you'll have to look out for, and that I think that potentially will be a suitor for him.
Johnny?
Tom, you're sharing a brain with me again, because that's the guy. Mike McDaniel was the guy I was thinking about too, and for all the reasons that you had said as well. But could I see them going Jim Caldwell? Possibly, but I think Mike McDaniel does make more sense for the Dolphins.
Yeah, help Tua out entering year 3 for sure.
Mm-hmm.
James?
Agree with you, Tom.
McDaniel. Okay.
Just makes sense in my eyes.
Another clean sweep. God damn it. Well, I know
3 out of 4.
Yeah,
3.5 out of 4.
3.5 out of 4. Well, think about it that way. Houston Texans are up next. They fired Dave Culley after 1 year, who I thought got the most out of a very weak Houston Texans roster. I thought he did a good job. They finished 4-13. Nick Caserio entering his second year as GM. With that being said, I think he's going to go with familiarity and hire Bryan Flores as his next head coach. I think that's a team, regardless. I think the only chance the Texans have of saving Deshaun Watson, who made it clear he wants out, is by hiring Bryan Flores and completely hitting the reset button. And I still think there's a chance Watson could leave and probably will leave, even if Flores is hired as the Texans head coach. But I think that is, look what Flores did with Miami. Now he could have the opportunity to do the same thing with the Houston Texans team, and he is very familiar with Nick Caserio. So this hire would make a lot of sense for Houston. So I'm going Coach Flo.
I would like to see Bryan Flores there as well. I think it makes sense. It does make a lot of sense, and he's established himself as a solid head coach in this league, no matter what happened with Miami, with the turmoil. But something I could see a little bit under the radar, defense coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles, Jonathan Gannon. He's been attracting some eyes to a lot of teams in terms of interest. I think he has 3 teams potentially that are lined up to interview him. And rightfully so. He's led a Philadelphia Eagles team. I think they were like 10th in passing this year, 10th in rush this year defensively, which is pretty solid all around, especially when you're looking at this Houston Texans defense, who it seems for as long as I've been watching them, they've been one of the worst in football. And while granted they have a lot of weaknesses on this team, I think defense is definitely a solid part to the contribution in which they continue to lose, while they do have some bright spots in the offense, like a Brandon Cooks and Davis Mills looked nice in some games. He looked like a decent rookie quarterback. Again, given a bad situation, but I think that they might go defensive-minded coach here, and especially because when I bring in this outside of the box hire, we already saw it with David Culley, right? Who even thought that David Culley would be a candidate last year to be a head coach in the National Football League? That was one outside the box hire. I think they might do it again with a Jonathan Gannon.
Interesting. That's a name I did not think of.
You know, what's very difficult about the Texans is we don't know yet what the deal is with Deshaun Watson, right? Is all this legal stuff going to be, sorted out before the start of next season? And if it is he going to get a suspension? That's a big question mark going in. But I think when you look at what you got out of that Texan staff from Coley, who by the way got the short end of the stick out of anybody this year. I mean, that was unbelievable. I mean, that team might have done more with less than almost any other team in football this year. So I think the coach that probably makes the most sense for them, given what they have, even if you are going with, let's say, Davis Mills going to next season, is Bryan Flores. See what he did over there. I was trying to make it sound a little different there, Tom. But you know what? I'm taking Flores, but I don't know if Deshaun Watson is going to be the quarterback next year. But I think somebody like him could get maybe a few wins even with what they have. So I'm taking Bryan Flores, but I almost wouldn't even put a question mark next to that because we still don't know what the quarterback situation is going to be there next year.
Very good point.
So let's say Bryan Flores with a question mark. So half agreement.
Yeah. James.
I'm going Kyle.
Gannon. Okay. Joe Gannon, Philadelphia Eagles. All right. Next up, the Chicago Bears fired Matt Nagy after 4 seasons, made the playoffs twice. This year, not very good. They ended up finishing 6-11. And I think they're going to replace Matt Nagy with Matt Eberflus. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He earned his second head coaching interview last week. I know he also earned a second interview with the Jacksonville Jaguars, but I think they're going to go with Eberflus. Good job with the Indianapolis Colts and their defense. Again, the Colts did a really good job. Their defense kept them in games this season. So I think he's going to be the hire in Chicago, only because I know the Bears are also interested in Daboll, but I think they're out on Daboll. And I think Matt Eberflus might be the next best option Although they could still go with an offensive mind like a Nathaniel Hackett, like a Byron Leftwich, something like that. But I think they're going with Matt Eberflus.
I think that my number one candidate, I think Bryan Flores is going to get this job. He's been attached to this team as well. You've seen what he's able to do with tremendous defense. Chicago has a tremendous defense. And I think that if he likes the quarterback in which he's working with, that will have success. And we saw what they got out of Miami, right, with Tua Tagovailoa. They had nothing there. One of the worst offensive lines in football. Really, outside of a rookie in Jalen Waddle, you had no really core receivers or running backs help whatsoever. You go to Chicago, you got Justin Fields, who has looked impressive at some points in times when put in the right situation. Allen Robinson, we'll see if he stays. They have young guys, Tom, your guy, Cole Kmet, who looks solid at tight end this year. David Montgomery is a really, really underrated running back. Doesn't get talked about enough, in my personal opinion. And I think that he can be a guy that can turn Chicago's situation around, especially when we start talking about Green Bay's situation. You know, people go right ahead, jump the gun, say Minnesota Vikings. Chicago could be right up with there if they have a solid head coach there. And another guy, just kind of a maybe not out of the box hire, but potentially be on the radar. Now that Ryan Poles, executive for the Chiefs, is there, maybe an Eric Bieniemy connection. Maybe he finally gets a job as a head coach in the National Football League potentially. But I think that Flores will get the job.
Interesting. Johnny?
Oh, Tom, no, I was just going to joke around with you, say, guess who I'm picking. No, I didn't have him. I actually had Hackett, the guy you were talking about, Nathaniel Hackett.
Okay.
I think is an outside guy. It's funny because I was trying to find a spot for Eric Bieniemy, but I can't find one for him.
Yeah, I mean, he's still coaching too, which makes it even more complicated.
That's the thing as well. He's still his coach. That's true.
Yeah.
But no, I have Nathaniel Hackett going to the Bears, so we do disagree on one.
Awesome. Yeah, I did mention him as a dark horse, though. Potential number 2 option. So, hey, like 6 and 5.5.
Yeah, that
5
works.
and a half. All right. James.
You guys are not expecting this. Andy Hopper will be the new Bears head coach.
How much did he pay you to say that?
Tom, you gotta clip that as soon as the show's over. Send it over, Andy. You gotta clip that. You gotta clip that.
No, but for real, we haven't talked about this one head coach yet, and it's the brother that's coaching in Michigan.
Harbaugh, yeah, maybe.
Jim Harbaugh?
Yeah, I get them both confused. That's why I said the one
okay.
in Michigan. I wouldn't be surprised if it's either he's there or he might be going to the Saints. That's
okay.
two
I'm
now.
thinking.
Ooh,
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
Very interesting.
All right.
The only reason why I wouldn't pick him to go to the Saints is if they're paying Sean Payton for 3 years, and you know you're gonna have to pay a ton of money to get him. I don't know if you're gonna want to spend that much money on 2 coaches.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No doubt.
But it's
especially because they're one of the worst teams in the NFL in terms of cap right now.
Exactly. Yeah, that was what I was gonna say is the cap situation there.
Which is why I guess we'll get to the Saints as the next team. Then I was going to save them for last, but we'll make the Jaguars last. Which is why I think the Saints, again, this news just happened today, so I know none of us have had much time to think about this. I think they're going with an in-house hire and promoting Dennis Allen to be their next head coach.
Yeah.
He's currently their defensive coordinator. He's done a phenomenal job with that defense, helped Trey Hendrickson be a sack leader 2 years ago and get a nice contract. Mario Davis, Marshawn Lattimore, those guys. I believe he's been the DC for the Saints since like 2015, 2016, something like that. So he's been an assistant head coach for a long time. And remember, he was the head coach for the Raiders from 2012 to 2014. So I'm going to go with Dennis Allen here because he has the experience. And I know he went 4-12 in both of his seasons with the Raiders and then went 0-4 before he was fired. But he has the experience, and due to the Saints cap situation, I think Dennis Allen will be their next head coach.
Yeah, to be short and sweet, Tom, I completely agree with you. I completely agree with everything that you said, especially because not only is it an in-house, but it's a successful in-house, right?
Yes.
When he took over as the Saints defensive coordinator, they were awful defense. Now you look at them now, they're one of the best defenses in all of football.
Absolutely. Johnny, who do you got for the Saints?
It's got to be somebody in house. I mean, and he makes the most sense. I mean, out of all the guys. So I'm going to agree with what Kyle said.
Not what Tom said.
I tried, Tom.
James.
I agree with you guys. I do want to say that maybe they'll hire Kevin. Maybe they'll hire Kevin James that just did a.
You see that Netflix special?
Oh yes.
So maybe Kevin James might be on the sidelines.
Maybe.
But no, on a seriously note, I agree with you guys.
Last team, the Jacksonville Jaguars fired Urban Meyer towards the end of the season. Didn't even make the end of the season. For me, it comes down to two candidates. It's either Bill O'Brien or Byron Leftwich. I think it's one of those two. And it's pretty much a coin flip for me. I think the biggest thing here is Trevor Lawrence, right? Mm-hmm. Who's the most ready to take on a year two Trevor Lawrence and a team that's kind of in dysfunction right now? Bill O'Brien's very familiar with the AFC South, and so is Byron Leftwich. I'm going to give O'Brien a slim edge here and go with him because he's been a head coach before. He was never a bad head coach. He was a bad GM. He was an awful GM. He tried to do too much at once, and he was bringing the Texans to the playoffs with guys like TJ Yates and whatnot before the Deshaun Watson era. He took the Texans to the playoffs twice before they even drafted Deshaun Watson. So I'm going to go with O'Brien here for the Jaguars, but my second pick for them would be Byron Leftwich. I just think, again, you go with the guy who's been a head coach before. And again, Leftwich, is it Brady? Is it Leftwich? Like, we don't really know, right? I mean, that Bucs offense is probably better than it is because of Tom Brady. So, but I think it's one of them too. I'm going to go O'Brien.
I'm going to go Byron Leftwich here. I think that when you look at Trevor Lawrence, and that's really the key factor, right? It's not necessarily the hire to be the head coach. It's the head coach that's going to bring Trevor Lawrence to that next level that everybody's talking about when you talk about generational quarterback. I think that Byron Leftwich, the experience in which he has, and now working with Tom Brady as well, taking that aspect of the game to Trevor Lawrence, who people are saying can be like an Andrew Luck, and people are saying can be a Peyton Manning. I think that would be perfect, along with other things as well. We talked about the free agents of Tampa, maybe a potential recruitment of a Chris Godwin, because that's a team that has some money, could throw around a little bit, give Trevor Lawrence a weapon. But I think that they might go in the direction of Byron Leftwich as the next head coach.
Interesting. And actually, another name I guess you have to throw in is Jim Caldwell because of the payroll situation, right?
Yes. I had Caldwell earlier with the Dolphins, but yeah, that's another one as well, definitely.
Yeah. Johnny, who do you got for Jacksonville?
I got one of two options. I've got either Byron Leftwich or Jim Caldwell, but Kyle kind of stole my thunder about Leftwich. I think it does make a lot of sense considering what he did over there in Tampa. So I do believe it's going to be Leftwich, but Jim Caldwell to me also does make sense. But if I'm in the Jacksonville spot, I think the guy that does make the most sense is Leftwich, and so that's who I'm going to go with.
Okay, James.
Leftwich for me too.
All right, so 3-1 in favor of Byron Leftwich. Awesome. Well, I'm glad we didn't clean sweep that one. We clean sweep a lot of them.
Hey, great minds think alike.
Exactly. Absolutely.